Colorado Territory, 1869. The sun cast long shadows across the mining town of Silver Creek as dust devils danced between weathered buildings. The war had ended 4 years prior, but its ghost still haunted the frontier. Men with haunted eyes and women with steely determination had ventured west seeking fortune or escape, sometimes both. In this unforgiving landscape of promise and peril, 25-year-old Caleb Crawford stood apart from the desperate prospectors and hard-bitten settlers. Caleb adjusted his Stetson as he surveyed the bustling Main Street. His lean, muscular frame betrayed years of hard riding across open country, yet his clean-shaven face maintained a youthful quality that his azure eyes contradicted. Those eyes had witnessed too much death for someone so young, first in the war, then on the frontier. His mother had once told him his eyes reminded her of summer skies, but that was before outlaws had raided their Texas homestead, leaving him the sole survivor. "A man stands alone out here," Caleb muttered to his paint-horse Spirit as they paused at the edge of town. "Friendship is a luxury, love is a death sentence." This belief had served him well since he'd buried his family 6 years ago. Riding for various outfits across Texas and Colorado, he'd earned a reputation as a reliable hand who kept to himself. No attachments meant no vulnerabilities. No vulnerabilities meant survival. The frontier had taught him that lesson through blood and loss. Caleb had come to Silver Creek for work, nothing more. The Rocking R Ranch needed experienced hands for a cattle drive to Denver, and Caleb needed money to continue his solitary journey westward. California called to him, a place to disappear completely. Just passing through, he reminded himself. Always just passing through. He tightened Spirit's cinch and led the horse down the main street toward the saloon, where the ranch foreman was hiring. The late afternoon sun glinted off the windows of Fairchild's Mercantile, momentarily blinding him. When his vision cleared, he saw her. She stood on the boardwalk outside the Mercantile, arguing with a portly man in a bowler hat. Her chestnut hair cascaded in waves beneath a modest bonnet, catching amber highlights in the sun. At 20 years old, her youth was evident in the smooth curve of her cheek, yet there was something in her posture, straight-backed and defiant, that spoke of unexpected strength. "The contract clearly states delivery by the 15th, Mr. Winters," she insisted, her voice carrying across the street. "My father paid half in advance." "Your father made agreements with half the merchants in 3 counties, Miss Riley," the man replied, mopping his brow. "God rest his soul, but his debts died with him." Caleb should have kept walking. The girl's problems weren't his concern, but something in her determined stance made him pause. She wore a simple blue calico dress, modest and practical, yet she carried herself with the dignity of royalty. "My father's word was his bond, sir," she replied, "and as his daughter I intend to honor it. I also intend to see those who made promises to him do the same." The merchant's face reddened. "Miss Bethany Riley, you're new to these parts, so let me explain how things work in Silver Creek." "Your Eastern notions." "My notions, as you call them, include the radical idea that contracts should be honored," she interrupted. "The supplies for the school must arrive by next week. The children have waited long enough." "School?" Caleb almost smiled. The girl was fighting for a school in a mining town where most children worked alongside their parents by age 10. Her idealism would be crushed quickly enough. The West had no patience for dreamers. Yet as Bethany Riley clutched her documents tighter, Caleb found himself stepping forward. "Afternoon," he said, tipping his hat, couldn't help overhearing. "Seems there's a misunderstanding about a delivery." Bethany turned, surprise evident in her amber eyes. For a moment they assessed each other, frontier pragmatist and Eastern idealist, each finding the other wanting. "This doesn't concern you, Cowboy," Winters said dismissively. Bethany lifted her chin. "Indeed, though I appreciate the gesture, sir, I can manage my own affairs." "Of course, ma'am," Caleb replied with a slight bow. "Just thought a witness might help clarify matters." Her eyes narrowed slightly. "A witness?" To the conversation about the school supplies, Caleb continued smoothly. "Mr. Winters here was just explaining how he plans to honor the contract your father arranged, seeing as the children need their school books." The merchant sputtered, "Now see here." "In fact," Caleb continued, I believe Sheriff Hollister would be mighty interested in hearing about any business dealing with a deceased man's estate that didn't follow proper legal channels. It was a bluff. Caleb knew nothing about Sheriff Hollister or legal channels in Silver Creek, but the name drop had its intended effect. The merchant's face paled. The supplies will arrive by the 15th, Winters conceded, as agreed. Good day, Miss Riley. He retreated into his store, leaving Bethany staring at Caleb with a mixture of gratitude and suspicion. Thank you, Mr. Crawford. Caleb Crawford. He tipped his hat again. No need for thanks. Men like Winters prey on those they perceive as vulnerable. Her spine stiffened. I am far from vulnerable, Mr. Crawford. My father may have died unexpectedly, but I am quite capable of managing his affairs. I meant no offense, Miss Riley. None taken. She studied him, those amber eyes disconcertingly direct. Are you new to Silver Creek? Just passing through, looking for work on a cattle drive. With the rocking R, when he nodded, she smiled slightly. My father owned land adjacent to theirs. We've arrived at a curious crossroads, Mr. Crawford. Before Caleb could respond, a commotion erupted down the street. A wagon had overturned and angry shouts filled the air. That's my wagon, Bethany exclaimed, gathering her skirts and rushing toward the scene. Caleb should have continued to the saloon. Instead, he followed her. The wagon had tipped onto its side, spilling crates and furniture into the muddy street. A burly man in dusty clothes was arguing with the driver. Miss Riley, the driver, an older man with a grizzled beard, called out. These men blocked the road deliberately. They said. We said this wagon ain't welcome, the burly man interrupted. Riley property belongs to the mining company now. Bethany drew herself up. That is patently false, Mr. Garrison. My father's will is clear. The homestead and all its contents belong to me. A woman can't hold mining rights, Garrison sneered, especially not a city girl playing at frontier life. Caleb stepped forward. The lady said the property is hers. And who might you be? Garrison asked, eyeing Caleb's worn trail clothes. Someone passing through, Caleb replied evenly. Someone who doesn't like seeing ladies harassed in the street. A tense silence fell. Caleb was acutely aware of the townspeople gathering, watching the confrontation with interest. He hadn't wanted attention. He'd wanted anonymity, a quick job, and the road west. Garrison spat on the ground. The mining company has rights to that land. Old Riley knew it before he died. My father never sold his mining rights, Bethany said firmly, and I have the deed to prove it. Deeds can be challenged, Garrison replied. You best sell while the offer stands, Miss Riley. A woman alone can't work a homestead or protect mining interests. I am not alone, she replied. I have hired help arriving, and my cousin is joining me from Boston next month. Caleb knew it was likely another bluff. The determined set of her jaw and the slight tremor in her hand suggested she was very much alone. Clear the road, came an authoritative voice. Sheriff Hollister, a weathered man with a silver mustache, approached. Garrison, this is the second disturbance this week. Whatever quarrel you have with the Riley estate can be settled legally. Garrison and his men reluctantly moved aside. Bethany thanked the sheriff, then turned to help right the wagon. Allow me, Caleb said, already moving to assist the driver. With several townspeople joining in, they soon had the wagon upright and the contents reloaded. Thank you again, Mr. Crawford, Bethany said when they finished. It seems I'm indebted to you twice in one day. No debt, he replied. Good luck with your homestead, Miss Riley. He turned to leave, but her voice stopped him. Mr. Crawford, I don't suppose you're looking for more permanent work than a cattle drive. He turned back surprised. I don't follow. As you heard, I need help at my father's, at my homestead. It's 10 miles outside town with good grazing land and a small orchard. The house needs repairs and there are cattle to tend. She hesitated. I can offer room, board, and fair wages. You're offering me a job. You don't know me. Her smile was slight but genuine. You stood up for a stranger twice today. In my experience, that reveals character. Caleb should have declined. His plan was simple. Work the cattle drive, earn enough to reach California, stay detached. Getting involved with Bethany Riley's problems meant entanglement, commitment. I appreciate the offer, but I'm not staying in Silver Creek. Something like disappointment flashed in her eyes before she nodded. Of course, safe travels then. As he watched her climb onto the wagon beside the driver, Caleb felt an unexpected pang of regret. He shook it off and continued toward the saloon. The sooner he secured work with the Rocking R, the sooner he could leave this town and the mysterious Bethany Riley behind. The Rocking R foreman, a gruff man named Jenkins, hired Caleb on site after learning of his experience. "We ride out in 3 weeks," Jenkins informed him. "Need to round up strays before the drive to Denver. In the meantime, you can help at the ranch." Caleb nodded, satisfied. 3 weeks of honest work, then on to California. He spent the next 2 days at the Rocking R, breaking horses and repairing fences. On the 3rd day, Jenkins called him to the main house. "Got a favor to ask," the foreman said. "Old Riley's daughter needs help clearing a blocked creek on her property. It's backing up onto our grazing land." Riley, Caleb frowned. "Bethany Riley. You know her. We met briefly in town." Jenkins nodded. "She's trying to manage that place alone since her father died. Stubborn as they come, won't sell to the mining company or the Rocking R, though both have made fair offers." "It's her property," Caleb said, surprising himself with the defensive tone. "That it is," Jenkins agreed, "and we need that creek flowing proper. Take 2 men and clear it today." Caleb rode out with 2 ranch hands, following the creek that separated Rocking R land from Riley property. As they crossed onto her land, Caleb saw the homestead in the distance, a modest 2-story house with a sagging porch, a weathered barn, and several outbuildings. The property had good bones but needed work. They found Bethany at the creek, attempting to move fallen tree limbs herself. She wore a simple work dress with the sleeves rolled up, her chestnut hair tied back in a practical braid. Her hands were scratched and muddy. "Miss Riley," Caleb called, dismounting. "Jenkins sent us to help with the creek." She straightened, wiping her brow with her forearm. "Mr. Crawford, I'm surprised to see you." "Working for the Rocking R until the cattle drive," he explained. "The blocked creek is affecting their grazing land." "I'm aware," she said. "I've been trying to clear it since yesterday." Together, they worked through the afternoon, removing branches and debris that had dammed the creek during spring rains. As they worked, Caleb found himself watching Bethany. Despite her refined speech and occasional references to Boston, she worked tirelessly, never complaining about the mud or the strain. "Your father taught you about land management?" he asked during a break. She shook her head. "My father was an investor. He purchased this property 2 years ago but remained in Boston managing other ventures. I visited last summer and fell in love with Colorado. When he died unexpectedly in February, I discovered he'd left everything to me." "So you decided to move west?" "There was nothing for me in Boston," she said simply. "My mother died years ago. Father's business associates expected me to sell everything and marry suitably." Her smile turned wry. "They're still waiting." "And the school supplies?" "You're opening a school. Children here deserve education, Mr. Crawford, even on the frontier." She gestured toward the blocked creek. "Just as they deserve clean water and safe passage." "Everything connects." By sunset, the creek flowed freely again. The other ranch hands rode back to the Rocking R, but Caleb lingered. "Thank you," Bethany said. "Would you care to stay for supper?" "It's simple fare, but there's plenty." Caleb hesitated. He'd maintained his distance from others for years. Breaking bread at her table felt dangerously like forming a connection. "Another time, perhaps," he said finally. "I should get back." Disappointment flickered across her face before she nodded. "Of course." As he rode back to the Rocking R, Caleb couldn't shake the image of Bethany Riley standing in the golden sunset light, determination and loneliness equally evident in her stance. She reminded him of himself 6 years ago, proud, stubborn, unwilling to admit the enormity of the task ahead. "Not my concern," he muttered to Spirit, "not staying here." Yet the next day, when Jenkins mentioned that Miss Riley's fence needed mending on their shared border, Caleb volunteered immediately. Over the next week, Caleb found himself at the Riley homestead almost daily, fixing fences, helping with cattle, repairing the barn roof. Each task was legitimate ranch business, yet he knew he was seeking excuses to return. Bethany worked alongside him when she could, asking thoughtful questions about ranching and sharing her plans for the property. "I want to expand the orchard," she told him one afternoon as they mended the chicken coop. "Father's notes mentioned that apples grow well in this soil." "Orchards take years to mature," Caleb pointed out. She smiled. "I plan to be here for years, Mr. Crawford." "Caleb," he corrected. After a week of mud and sweat, formality seems excessive. "Caleb," she agreed, "and I'm Bethany." That evening, he finally accepted her dinner invitation. They sat at her simple kitchen table, eating stew and fresh bread as twilight descended outside. Caleb couldn't remember the last time he'd shared a meal in someone's home rather than a bunkhouse or saloon. "Why California?" Bethany asked as she poured coffee. Caleb looked up, surprised. "How did you know?" "You mentioned it to Jenkins. He said you're determined to reach the coast." "I need a fresh start," Caleb said simply. "Isn't Colorado fresh enough? We've barely been a territory for 8 years." He shrugged. "Some ghosts follow you regardless of state lines." Bethany studied him across the table, her amber eyes thoughtful. "The war." "Partly," he admitted, "and what came after." She didn't press, and he was grateful. Instead, she told him about Boston, about her father's unexpected death from pneumonia, about arriving in Silver Creek to find her inheritance contested by the mining company. "They claim father sold the mineral rights before he died," she explained, "but there's no record of such a sale. They've offered to buy the entire property, but this land was his dream." She looked around the modest kitchen. "Now it's mine." "Dreams are dangerous out here," Caleb said quietly. "The frontier doesn't forgive idealists." "Perhaps not," Bethany replied, "but without dreams, what separates us from mere survival?" The question haunted Caleb long after he'd ridden back to the rocking R. For 6 years, survival had been enough, necessary, and sufficient. He deliberately avoided dreams, attachments, hopes for anything beyond seeing the next sunrise. Yet watching Bethany fight for her father's legacy, for a school, for a future in this harsh land, stirred something he'd thought long dead. It terrified him. The following morning, Caleb was splitting wood behind the rocking R bunkhouse when Jenkins approached. "Riley girl's in trouble," the foreman said without preamble. "Mining company men are at her place. Sheriff's out of town tracking horse thieves." Caleb dropped the axe. "What kind of trouble?" "Trying to force her to sign over the deed," Jenkins spat. "Boss says to stay out of it. Mining company has powerful friends, but thought you should know." Caleb was on spirit within minutes, riding hard toward the Riley homestead. As he approached, he saw 3 men on horseback surrounding Bethany on her front porch. She stood with a shotgun, holding them at bay. "The deed stays with me, Mr. Garrison," she was saying as Caleb rode up. "If you have legitimate claims, present them in court." Garrison, the same burly man from town, sneered. "Courts take time, Miss Riley. Winter comes early in these mountains. Shame if you found yourself without supplies or helpers when the snow flies." "She won't be without help," Caleb said, dismounting and stepping into the yard. The men turned. Garrison's eyes narrowed. "The drifter, still here, are you?" "Still here," Caleb confirmed, his hand resting near his holster. And Miss Riley made herself clear. "This matter belongs in court." "Crawford, isn't it?" one of the other men asked. "Heard you're riding with the rocking R. Mr. Patterson wouldn't appreciate his hands interfering with mining business." "I speak for myself," Caleb replied evenly. "And I say 3 armed men threatening a woman looks like a hanging offense in any territory." Tension crackled in the air. Garrison studied Caleb, measuring his resolve. "We'll return with papers," Garrison finally said. "Legal papers. The company won't be denied what's rightfully theirs." They rode off, dust billowing behind them. Bethany lowered the shotgun, her hands trembling slightly. "Are you hurt?" Caleb asked, climbing the porch steps. She shook her head. "They arrived an hour ago, said they were giving me one last chance to sell voluntarily." Her voice was steady despite her shaking hands. "Thank you for coming." "Jenkins told me." He took the shotgun gently from her grip. "Would you have used this?" "If necessary," she met his eyes. "I won't be bullied from my land, Caleb." He believed her. This Eastern woman with her schoolbooks and orchard dreams had steel in her spine. The realization stirred admiration and fear for her safety. "They'll be back," he warned, "with or without legal papers." I know, she straightened her shoulders. Father's lawyer in Denver is reviewing the deed. Until then, I'll manage. Caleb ran a hand through his hair, conflicted. The cattle drive would leave in less than 2 weeks. He should focus on earning his wages and moving on. Bethany Riley's problems weren't his, yet he couldn't walk away. Not yet, your job offer, he said suddenly. Is it still open? Surprise flickered across her face. Yes, but the cattle drive. Jenkins can find another hand. Caleb surprised himself with the decisiveness in his voice. You need help here more than the rocking R needs another drover. What about California? She asked softly. California will still be there after I help you get through harvest, he replied. It was a compromise with himself, not staying permanently, just long enough to ensure she was safe. Relief and something warmer filled her amber eyes. Thank you, Caleb, truly. That evening, he moved his few possessions into the small cabin behind Bethany's house. As he settled spirit in the barn, Caleb tried to convince himself this was simply another job, temporary, practical, uninvolved. But watching the lights glow in Bethany's kitchen window, he knew he was lying to himself. For the first time in 6 years, he cared what happened to another person. The realization was as terrifying as it was undeniable. The days fell into a rhythm. Caleb rose before dawn to tend the animals, then spent his days repairing the homestead's neglected structures. Bethany worked alongside him when she wasn't managing the household or corresponding with her father's associates in Denver. In the evenings, they often sat on the porch, talking as twilight settled over the mountains. Tell me about your family, Bethany said one evening, 2 weeks after Caleb had moved to the homestead. Caleb stiffened. He never discussed his past. But something about the peaceful dusk and Bethany's gentle presence loosened the tight control he maintained over his memories. My parents had a small ranch in Texas, he began haltingly. Nothing grand, 50 head of cattle, some horses, a vegetable garden my mother tended. My father built the house himself. It sounds lovely, Bethany said softly. It was. Caleb stared at the darkening mountains. I was 19 when I joined the Confederate Army. Not out of political conviction, Texas was home, that's all. Spent 2 years fighting, came back to find my parents' ranch burned and them buried on the hillside. Bethany's intake of breath was sharp. Raiders. He nodded. Neighbors said a gang came through, looking for easy targets with men away fighting. My parents refused to abandon their home. His voice grew distant. I should have been there. You couldn't have known, Bethany said gently. The war took so many in so many ways. After that, I drifted. Texas held too many ghosts. Worked ranches across the territories, never staying long enough to form attachments. Until now, Bethany said, so quietly he almost missed it. Their eyes met in the gathering darkness. Something unspoken passed between them, recognition, perhaps, of shared loss and unexpected connection. The moment broke when a rider approached at speed. Caleb stood, hand moving to his holster, but relaxed when he recognized Jenkins from the rocking R. Crawford, the foreman called, dismounting. Miss Riley. What brings you out, Jenkins? Caleb asked, noting the man's troubled expression. Warning, mining companies brought in hired guns. 3 men rode in yesterday, not miners or businessmen. Gunmen. Jenkins removed his hat. Word is they're planning something at the town meeting tomorrow. Bethany frowned, the meeting about the school. Why would they? They know you'll be there, Jenkins interrupted. Perfect opportunity to apply pressure, public-like. Caleb's jaw tightened. We won't attend. I most certainly will, Bethany countered. The children need that school, and I've worked too hard arranging the building and supplies to miss this vote. Bethany, Caleb began, frustration evident in his voice. I won't hide on my own land, she said firmly. But I appreciate the warning, Mr. Jenkins. After the foreman departed, Caleb tried again to dissuade her from attending the meeting. Their argument lasted well into the night, neither willing to yield. This is exactly what they want, Caleb insisted. To corner you publicly, force your hand. And if I don't appear, they'll claim victory through my absence, Bethany replied. I won't give them the satisfaction. Her eyes softened. But I understand if you prefer not to accompany me. The implied challenge in her words was unmistakable. Caleb ran a hand through his hair in frustration. Of course I'll accompany you. Someone needs to watch your back when your stubborn pride leads you into trouble. Her smile was worth the aggravation. Then we're agreed we attend together. The town meeting was held in Silver Creek's newly constructed church. Caleb felt the tension as soon as they entered. Townsfolk filled the pews, with Garrison and 3 unfamiliar men standing at the back. The strangers had the hard eyes and relaxed posture of men comfortable with violence. The meeting began with routine matters: road repairs, the need for a new well, updates on the telegraph line being extended to Silver Creek. Finally, Mayor Thompson brought up the school proposal. Miss Riley has secured funding and supplies, the mayor announced. The old Miller cabin has been donated for this purpose. The question before us is whether to proceed with opening in September. Bethany stood to address the gathering. She spoke eloquently about the importance of education, even on the frontier. As she concluded, Caleb noted the genuine interest in many faces. The town was listening. Then Garrison stepped forward. Before we vote, there's another matter to discuss: the Riley property and its disputed mineral rights. The mayor frowned. That's not on today's agenda, Mr. Garrison. It concerns this very proposal, Garrison insisted. The funding Miss Riley offers comes from contested property. The mining company has prior claim to those lands and resources. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Bethany stood again, composed despite the ambush. The deed to my father's property is clear and uncontested in legal records, she stated. Any claims to the contrary should be addressed through proper channels, not as a distraction from children's education. One of the strangers stepped forward, his voice deceptively mild. Ladies shouldn't involve themselves in men's business, especially mining rights. Education is everyone's business, Bethany responded evenly, and property rights are determined by law, not gender. The tension in the room thickened. Caleb shifted slightly, positioning himself to better protect Bethany if needed. The mining company has been patient, Garrison continued. But patience has limits. Those who stand in the way of progress often find themselves disadvantaged. The threat hung in the air. Caleb's hand moved toward his holster, but Bethany's next words stopped him. Is that how we define progress in Silver Creek? She asked, addressing the townspeople directly. Through threats and intimidation, I came here believing the West offered opportunity for those willing to work for it, regardless of background or gender. Her voice strengthened. My father believed in this community. That's why he invested here, why he planned a school, why he envisioned orchards that would feed this town for generations. She gestured toward Garrison and his men. These gentlemen offer quick profit from mines that will be abandoned once depleted. I offer a lasting investment in our children and land. Her gaze swept the room. The choice is yours. A heavy silence followed. Then Martha Hollister, the sheriff's wife, stood. I have 3 children who need schooling. The mining company hasn't offered to build a school. Others began nodding, voicing support. Mayor Thompson called for order, then the vote. The school proposal passed overwhelmingly, with only Garrison and his associates opposed. As the meeting adjourned, Caleb kept close to Bethany, wary of Garrison's men. They exited to find the afternoon sun bathing the street in golden light. Congratulations, Caleb said quietly as they walked toward their wagon. You have a way with words. Bethany smiled, relief evident in her face. Truth has its own power, I simply. Miss Riley called a sharp voice. Garrison approached, his 3 companions flanking him. This isn't over. Caleb moved protectively closer to Bethany. The town has spoken, Garrison. The school will open. I'm not talking about the damn school, Garrison snapped. The mining rights, the company wants an answer by week's end, sell willingly or face consequences. There's nothing to sell, Bethany replied. My father never signed over mining rights. One of the strangers, tall, with a scar running along his jaw, stepped forward. Let me be plain, Miss Riley. Women die easy out here. Accidents happen. Homesteads burn. Caleb's hand flew to his gun, but Bethany gripped his arm. Are you threatening me, sir? She asked, her voice steady despite her pale face. Stating facts, the man replied with a cold smile. Think carefully about your situation, alone except for one drifter, miles from town. She's not alone, came a new voice. Sheriff Hollister approached, rifle in hand. and threats against property owners in my jurisdiction are taken very seriously." The standoff lasted several tense seconds before Garrison nodded to his men. "We'll continue this discussion later, Miss Riley. Consider our offer." As they walked away, Sheriff Hollister turned to Bethany. "Miss Riley, I'd advise staying in town tonight. My wife would welcome the company." "Thank you, Sheriff, but I won't be driven from my home," Bethany replied, "though I appreciate your concern." The ride back to the homestead was tense. As they approached the house, Caleb studied the surrounding landscape with new wariness. The isolated property, once peaceful, now seemed dangerously vulnerable. "You should have accepted the sheriff's offer," he said as he helped Bethany from the wagon. "And show weakness, abandon my home at the first threat." She shook her head. "That's what they want, Caleb. They want the mining rights. If you're dead, they can't get them," he pointed out bluntly. Fear finally flashed in her eyes, quickly masked. "Then we'll be vigilant." That night, Caleb didn't sleep. He kept watch from the porch, rifle across his knees, listening for approaching riders. As dawn broke, he checked the perimeter before returning to find Bethany in the kitchen, preparing breakfast. "You didn't sleep," she observed, setting coffee before him. "Neither did you," he replied, noting the shadows beneath her eyes. She sat across from him, cradling her own coffee cup. "What happens now?" "We prepare," Caleb said grimly. "I'll ride to town today, speak with the sheriff about increasing patrols. We'll reinforce doors and windows, establish signals with neighboring ranches." "And if that's not enough," Bethany asked softly. Caleb met her gaze across the table. "It has to be." Over the next 3 days, they fortified the homestead. Caleb showed Bethany how to use the rifle and revolver, drilling her until her aim was true and her hands steady. They established escape routes and hiding places, preparing for the worst while hoping for intervention from Denver, where Bethany's lawyer was gathering evidence against the mining company's claims. On the 4th night, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, Bethany broke their companionable silence. "Why did you stay, Caleb, truly?" He considered deflecting, but found himself answering honestly. "At first, to help a neighbor in need, Then, she prompted when he trailed off. "Then I stayed for you," he admitted quietly, "because you fight for what matters even when it seems impossible. Because you see beauty where others see only profit or peril." He looked away, uncomfortable with his own vulnerability. "You remind me that survival isn't enough." Bethany's hand found his in the gathering darkness. "I'm glad you stayed." The touch of her hand sent warmth through him, breaking through barriers he'd maintained for years. For a moment, he allowed himself to imagine a different future, one where he remained in Silver Creek, helping build the life Bethany envisioned. A future with connection, purpose, perhaps even love. The fantasy shattered at the sound of approaching riders. Caleb was on his feet instantly, guiding Bethany into the house and retrieving his rifle. "Get the shotgun," he instructed. "Use the back window to watch the barn. If I fall, don't hesitate, ride for town." "I won't leave you," she protested. "Bethany," he gripped her shoulders, "promise me." Something in his eyes must have convinced her, for she nodded reluctantly. "Be careful." Caleb positioned himself by the front window as 3 riders entered the yard, Garrison and 2 of his hired guns. The scarred man from town dismounted first, followed by Garrison. The 3rd remained on horseback, rifle ready. "Miss Riley," Garrison called, "we've come to conclude our business." Caleb stepped onto the porch, rifle leveled. "Leave now, Garrison." Crawford, the mining agent, smiled unpleasantly. "Still playing protector, step aside." "This doesn't concern you." "Anything threatening Miss Riley concerns me," Caleb replied evenly. "The sheriff knows you're here. Any violence will bring consequences." The scarred man laughed. "Sheriff's handling a disturbance at the saloon." "Convenient, isn't it?" Caleb's grip tightened on his rifle. They'd planned this well. "Miss Riley," Garrison called again. "One last chance. Sign the deed transfer and we leave peacefully. Refuse and we'll take more persuasive measures." The front door opened and Bethany stepped onto the porch beside Caleb, shotgun in hand. "My answer remains the same, Mr. Garrison. The property is not for sale." Garrison sighed theatrically. "Very well," he nodded to his men. "Show them we're serious." The scarred man raised his rifle, aiming not at them but at the barn. The shot cracked through the evening air, followed by the frightened whinnies of horses. "Next one hits the house," the man called. "Or maybe that prize stallion of yours, Crawford." Rage coursed through Caleb. These men threatened not just property but everything Bethany had worked for, everything she dreamed of building. Without conscious thought, he squeezed the trigger. The scarred man dropped with a cry, clutching his shoulder. Chaos erupted. The mounted man fired, his bullet splintering wood near Caleb's head. Bethany discharged the shotgun, forcing Garrison to dive for cover. Caleb fired again, hitting the mounted gunman's leg. "Enough!" Garrison shouted from behind a water trough. "You're outnumbered, Crawford. The company will send more men." "Not if they learn their agent committed attempted murder," came a new voice. Sheriff Hollister emerged from the darkness beside the barn, rifle aimed at Garrison. Behind him stood two deputies. The fight drained from Garrison's posture. The sheriff approached cautiously. "Seems we arrived just in time," Hollister said, keeping his rifle trained on Garrison. "My wife mentioned your concerns, Miss Riley. When I saw these three leave town, I followed." Relief washed over Bethany's face. "Thank you, Sheriff." As the deputies disarmed and bound the mining agents, Caleb checked Bethany for injuries. "Are you hurt?" She shook her head, her hands still gripping the shotgun. "You could have been killed." "Worth the risk," he replied simply. The intensity in her amber eyes stole his breath. For a moment, the chaos around them faded, leaving only this connection, fragile yet undeniable. Sheriff Hollister's approach broke the spell. "Miss Riley, this should buy you some peace. These men will face charges in Denver. With their testimony, we can investigate the mining company's tactics." After the sheriff departed with his prisoners, Bethany and Caleb stood in the quiet yard, the tension of violence slowly ebbing. "It's not over," Caleb cautioned. "The mining company may send others." "Perhaps," Bethany acknowledged, "but tonight we prevailed." She turned toward the house, then paused. "Will you stay, not just tonight but longer?" The question hung between them, weighted with implications. Caleb had planned to leave after ensuring her safety, to continue his westward journey. The frontier taught harsh lessons about attachment, how quickly it could become loss. Yet standing there in the moonlight, looking at Bethany Riley with her determined spirit and gentle strength, Caleb confronted the truth he'd been avoiding. He was already attached. Somewhere between fixing her barn roof and defending her home, his heart had made decisions his mind was only now recognizing. "I'll stay," he said finally, "as long as you need me." The smile that illuminated her face was worth every risk. The following weeks brought significant changes. True to Sheriff Hollister's prediction, the mining company retreated when faced with legal scrutiny and negative publicity. Bethany received confirmation from Denver that her father's deed was indeed intact, with no evidence of mineral rights transfer. Caleb remained at the Riley homestead, overseeing the autumn harvest and continuing repairs. Their relationship evolved gradually, professional respect deepening into friendship blossoming into something neither named but both felt. They worked side by side during the day and talked late into the evening, sharing stories and dreams. The school opened in September, with Bethany dividing her time between teaching and managing the homestead. Caleb often rode into town with her, finding unexpected satisfaction in helping construct desks or install bookshelves for the eager students. "You're good with the children," Bethany observed one afternoon as they rode home. "Have you ever thought of having a family of your own?" The question caught him off guard. "Not for many years," he admitted. "After losing my parents, family seemed like a luxury I couldn't afford, emotionally or practically." "And now?" she asked, her tone carefully neutral. Caleb considered his answer honestly. "Now I'm beginning to remember what it feels like to build rather than just survive." He glanced at her. "You've reminded me of that, Bethany, of what matters beyond the next horizon." Color touched her cheeks as she smiled. "I'm glad." As autumn deepened toward winter, Caleb found himself making more permanent improvements to the homestead. A root cellar for winter storage, reinforced barn doors to withstand mountain winds, a repaired chimney for efficient heating. Each project represented commitment, not to the land itself, but to the woman who loved it. On a crisp November evening, as the first snow dusted the distant peaks, Bethany sat beside Caleb on the porch swing he'd built the previous month. Winter's coming, she observed, pulling her shawl tighter. It is, he agreed. The pass to Denver will close soon. Silence stretched between them, comfortable yet expectant. Caleb knew what remained unspoken. Winter in the mountains meant months of isolation, of shared confinement in close quarters. It meant commitment or departure. California will be warmer, Bethany said quietly. If that's still your destination. Caleb turned to her, studying the profile he'd come to know as well as his own reflection, the determined chin, the gentle curve of her cheek, the amber eyes that saw through his carefully constructed defenses. There was nothing for me in California, he realized aloud, just another place to avoid putting down roots. He took her hand, marveling at how natural the gesture felt after years of avoiding human contact. The roots I've been running from have found me anyway. Is that so terrible? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. It terrified me, he admitted. The idea of caring, of building something that could be lost. His thumb traced circles on her palm. But you've shown me that the risk of loss is worth the joy of connection. Bethany's eyes glistened in the fading light. Are you saying you'll stay through winter? I'm saying I'll stay, Caleb replied simply, not just through winter. Not just as your hired hand. He hesitated, then continued with newfound courage. If you'll have me, Bethany Riley, I'd like to stay as your partner, in this homestead, in the school, in building the future you envision. Her sharp intake of breath was followed by a smile that outshone the emerging stars. Are you proposing, Caleb Crawford? Inelegantly, he acknowledged with a self-deprecating smile, but sincerely. He brought her hand to his lips. I love you, Bethany, your strength, your vision, your compassion. You've healed parts of me I thought were beyond repair. Tears spilled onto her cheeks as she nodded. Yes, she whispered. Yes to partnership, to building together, to love. She leaned forward, resting her forehead against his. I've been hoping you'd ask. Their first kiss was gentle, a promise exchanged beneath the vast Colorado sky as twilight deepened into night. For Caleb, it marked the end of 6 years of solitary wandering. For Bethany, it confirmed the rightness of her decision to forge a life on the frontier. They married 2 weeks later in Silver Creek's church, with Sheriff Hollister's wife arranging flowers and Jenkins from the Rocking R serving as Caleb's best man. The town turned out in force, celebrating not just a union but the community Bethany had helped strengthen through her school and stubborn belief in frontier possibilities. The following spring found the Riley Crawford homestead transformed. New fruit trees dotted the expanded orchard, a water wheel improved irrigation, and a nursery was being prepared in the room adjacent to the master bedroom. On a warm May evening, as they watched sunset from their porch swing, Bethany placed Caleb's hand on her slightly rounded belly. Your father would be proud, Caleb said, marveling at the new life growing within her. His vision expanded beyond anything he might have imagined. Bethany smiled, leaning against her husband's shoulder. The school has 12 students now. Next year we'll need to expand. We'll build whatever is needed, Caleb promised, for the school, for our family, for this community. As darkness settled over the Colorado mountains, Caleb Crawford reflected on the journey that had brought him here, from solitary survivor to husband, teacher, future father. The frontier had nearly broken him once, teaching harsh lessons about loss. But through Bethany, he'd learned equally powerful truths about healing, connection, and the courage to build despite uncertainty. This was the real frontier spirit, he realized, not just enduring hardship but creating beauty in its midst, not just surviving alone but thriving together. What are you thinking? Bethany asked, noticing his contemplative expression. Caleb smiled, pulling her closer. That I'm exactly where I'm meant to be. The Riley Crawford homestead stood as testament to what love could build on the frontier, a legacy of education, community, and hope that would shape Silver Creek for generations to come. For a reluctant bride who refused to surrender her dreams and a cowboy who'd forgotten how to dream at all, it was a love story that changed the West forever.